ate noodles with no packet.
Holy shit, I ain't never taking perk 30s ever again! Get these bitches out of here!
I saw this School of Life quote recently which really struck
I saw the School of Life school recently. Oh, butter chicken.
a chord with me. You know you've had a happy childhood if you don't want to be famous. This got me really thinking that if you've grown up feeling seen, emotionally mirrored, and safe and secure in your identity, then you don't need a million strangers to
If the roti is not rotting, then you probably have the problem.
acknowledge your existence. Michael Jackson became the most recognized human being on the planet, and yet spent his adulthood trying to rebuild the childhood he never got to live.
Guys.
Marilyn Monroe was
Excuse
desired
me.
by the entire world and wrote that she felt like a projection and not a person. David Bowie kept creating new identities because being himself
David Bus. Okay, all right. I apologize, David Bowie. David Bowie. Oh, sorry. Okay, Seth. Let's get into the video. Stop it. Stop that.
never felt survivable. The unhappy creative child grows up thinking that fame will fix that hole inside of them, but it never seems to do so. This video is not about fame, it's trying to decode why anyone would want to be famous in the first place. It's about that timeline which turns
Okay, fine. I'll give you my quick synopsis on why people will want to be famous. Usually, it comes from if you want fame, it's usually having to do with something outside of yourself, okay? You have to be secure in yourself here in your heart of hearts first, which usually makes it so that you don't want fame. Because to jump through the hoops and hurdles of what's going on the outside to achieve fame, you essentially have to accept the bullshit. And if you can't accept the bullshit, then you can't have fame because there's rules to this game, all right? Whether it's the Harvey Weinsteins or it's the P. Diddy's or the Epsteins of the world, there's rules and people will trade the morality for fame. As somebody who does not play those kind of games like me, I don't give a fuck about fame, okay? I do things for the love of the game, which is why sometimes that will take you a longer stretch to achieve what you want to. You can climb the ladder faster if you're willing to get yourself. All right? Let's get back to the video.
a sensitive child into an adult which needs the public gaze to stabilize a sense of rejection which never seems to go away. I've spent my whole life perhaps unsuccessful.
Exactly. You're vapid and empty inside, and so you seek affection and acceptance outside of yourself, but it never ends. You can never achieve something that is outside of you. You have to have it first. You need to be secure in your heart of hearts first. No amount of outside appreciation will fill the void that is in your heart.
Trying to be known and be acknowledged. And in today's video, I'm trying to understand why this feeling exists at all. Chapter 1. When love becomes conditional. We assume that the child who wants fame must have been deeply ambitious from childhood. But weirdly enough, I think nothing could be further from the truth. This child is actually a highly sensitive child. The kind of child who feels everything too deeply, who reads emotional shifts in a room instantly, who connects to music or images or even words in a way that seems physical. Linda Silverman's work on highly creative children shows the same cognitive baselines again and again. Heightened sensitivity, extreme empathy, and early self-awareness. This, in the right environment, becomes a gift. But when this nervous system develops inside an environment where love is conditional and attention is inconsistent, where differences are not understood, but in fact called weird or even mocked, this person's internal wiring starts to get attached to performance. This comes directly from John Bowlby's attachment theory, later expanded through the strange situation studies by Mary Ainsworth. The child learns, I am valued when I do something exceptional. In a performance-based environment, this child starts thinking that they need to be exceptional in order to receive love. You can see this in Stevie Wonder being a child.
Which explains why in sort of African households where you are essentially rewarded for doing well in school and curriculum or at work, which is why they end up, and it's a perfect example from my own life of in school, the only time where there was a sense of appreciation was when I was achieving either good grades or I was doing something that was deemed to be excellent in the classroom. There was this math program and I had spent all this time making sure that I was in the top 5 or whatever. I think it was like the top 10 in the school, right? It was like, I don't know if you guys remember Success Maker, but essentially I made it so like, oh, I'm going early to school to make sure I'm number 1. And it's like, I don't even like math, but I'm doing these things and I'm trying to get these high scores so that I will get the love and affection of my parents. School, something that I don't even like, that's like complete BS. It has nothing to do with creativity, but this is the only way you can get the affection of your parents is through performative actions in school. And so everything you start doing becomes performative. Everything you start doing becomes an act of having to prove yourself to the outside, when the only person you should prove yourself to is in your heart.
Child prodigy before he was even a teenager. The applause came before the identity even formed. The world tells you what you are worth based on what you can do. And this is the moment I feel this equation forms quietly and permanently. Who I am equals what I can do and what I can give. And this child starts to grow up with one mission. I will become impossible to overlook. Chapter 2. The outsider and the inner world. There's a phase which arrives relatively early on in highly creative children, which is when they start to realize that their inner world is way more intense than the environment they're in. And this starts to develop into social isolation from an early age. Miraka Gross's research shows that the greater the inner complexity of a child, the harder it becomes for them to find friends or people to relate to in their immediate peer group. Imagine Freddie Mercury growing up as Farrokh Bulsara, culturally displaced and visually and internally a different boy. And that's where he started developing Freddie. When he realized that he as himself didn't fit into the world he belonged in, he started forming an identity which could perhaps move through it. It's a survival and a self-defense mechanism if you think about it. This is the moment where
Mechanism?
you start editing yourself to fit into an image which you think might be more acceptable on the outside. You try to lower your intensity and hide what you love. You start becoming hyper aware of how you're perceived, and everything that you perceive as a flaw in you starts to become a problem. I think every person who's ever tried to become famous has a deep problem with their own self-image. And this is because their inner worth comes from outer approval. And at this
Yeah, exactly, bro. This is why even to this day I still deal with the idea of hating myself a little bit, bro. I still always have this idea of I'm not a good person and I'm a sort of an evil person, and then I always have to play with those ideas. These ideas of self-isolation that I have, because in my mind I'm always like, I'm a bad person. Why would anybody want to spend any time with me? Why would anybody want to be around me? So let me just sort of self-isolate and focus on achieving great things, because if I do that, then in that way I can be liked. But to be liked for who I am, so I always have that internal monologue and internal battle with myself, and I have to constantly remind myself, no, you're actually a good person, Ceph.
point of time, your inner and outer timelines and worlds start to separate. Your outer life becomes functional, while your inner world remains real. And everything you build from here on is an attempt to reconnect them. Chapter 3, the I'll show them engine. By the time adolescence hits, this inner feeling of not being seen or understood turns into a kind of propulsion engine. This is where the work ethic, the perfectionism, and the obsessive tendencies we see a lot of famous people possessing start to appear. What looks like hunger and obsession to the outer world is psychologically just compensation for an inner wound which just seems to get bigger. Psychologically, this was explained by Alfred Adler's theory of compensation. When a person fundamentally feels inferior or unseen, they build excellence in another domain to rebuild their self-worth. So the drive may not be I
I feel like this nigga's talking to me, dude.
want success. It might just be I refuse to be invisible. Think of Madonna arriving in New York with nothing and refusing to disappear. And her every reinvention and every era, every escalation is that same nervous system trying to stabilize itself through recognition and a refusal to be ignored. While you may fool yourself,
Which makes a lot of sense. Look at all the Botox and her wanting to fit into today's modern look. The Botox, the BBL. What kind of 70-year-old woman gets Botox in a BBL, man? That's crazy.
thinking that you're in the pursuit of greatness. What you're actually attempting to achieve is a sense of inner stability that you might have never known. And it works for a couple of minutes or so. Every milestone gives you relief, and every achievement gives you a temporary sense of existence. But because your sense of internal validation is coming from external metrics, it fades quicker than it arrives. Which is why this phase, I think, never seems to plateau or end. Nothing ever seems to fill that void inside you. And this void has existed for as long as you remember. Chapter 4. The Validation Addiction. Finally,
That's so true, bro. That's what I always say. I'm like, there's always this looming sense of sadness, man, that exists inside of me. And it probably exists in you too. But I'm just saying there's been very few moments where I feel like it comes and goes. I feel like he's saying, when I achieve something, some sort of milestone, I feel happy. And then quickly as the happiness came, it goes. Not to say that we should live our lives to be happy, because that in itself also, yes, chasing happiness is for women and children, okay? But there's this fleeting moment where I achieve something, and then it's like, okay, after 20 minutes it's gone, and it's like, okay, what's the next mountain we can climb? That means that inside of my heart of hearts is a hole, bro. And I know I should probably go see somebody or talk to somebody about it, but I don't. I can't. I'm so obsessed with this idea of creating ideas and ideologies, so much so to the point where a lot of people will be like, oh, why don't you marry or have children? And it's because I don't believe that I could ever be a good father because I'm so caught up in these ideas of making artistic projects. And what's the next artistic project? What's the next mountain to climb? I should probably see a therapist.
Enough, if you've done everything correctly, by the time you're an adult, this loop closes and suddenly you have an audience. And psychologically, I think this audience becomes an attachment figure. Jennifer Crocker's work on contingent self-worth shows that when identity is built through external validation, self-esteem becomes unstable and addictive. You're only okay when you are being seen. Kurt Cobain is the clearest example of what happens when recognition arrives but the internal structure doesn't change. He had total visibility and total cultural impact, but his private sense of disconnection got worse the more famous he got. It did not seem to heal, it did not seem to get better. Because fame only rewards your persona, which is the outer shell you've created to interface with the world. But it does nothing to heal the person inside, because that person inside has always felt worthless. The person inside feels that their sense of self-worth comes from metrics, from numbers, from views, from streams, from followers, from money. And this becomes like a drug you're addicted to. And like every drug ever, it creates more damage to your soul than ever fixing it. Each spike in metrics calms your body, and every drop escalates your sense of worthlessness. And this is because you learned early on that attention equals connection. And without attention, you yourself have forgotten who you are. I think fame cannot solve this.
Stop talking to me like this. Stop talking to me like this. You're not my fucking therapist, okay? Gurjeet, you're not. All right? Relax. He's speaking right fucking to me, bro. What can I do? I love this shit, bro. I'm like the nigga from fucking, what's that movie? Paid in Full or whatever the fuck, that New York film. I love the hustle, man. I love the game. I can't get enough, man. When I see the amount of views I have every 24 hours, man, I love that shit, dog. I love that shit. I love making videos and making my shorts and seeing the money pile up in my AdSense revenue, nigga. I love that shit. God damn it.
Attachment wound, which is why some of the most visible people in history have still felt unseen. The only way out of the loop. Sometimes I sit and think, what is the real thing a creative life needs? And I'm not sure the answer that we are seeking lies in the transition from being unknown to becoming famous. I think it's when we shift our sense of self-worth from external to internal validation. Self-determination theory by Deci and Ryan shows that sustainable drive comes from internal and intrinsic meaning rather.
Which is why I always find time to commune with myself, to meditate, and to try to clear the cobwebs of BS that exist in the brain. I have to reaffirm to myself that I'm a good person. I am loved. People like to talk to me. People like being around me. I have to remove this demon of negative self-worth and reevaluate my own self and sit down with myself and tell me, I look at meditation these days as if I'm sitting down in a dark room with myself, like an interrogation room. And I'm talking to myself and letting him know, you're good, you're loved. Just brushing the dust off this little kid's shoulders, brushing the dust out of this little kid's hair, which is me. And I'm telling myself, all this pain, all this hate, all this rejection that you faced as a kid, it's okay. You're going to be okay. Because if I don't, then I fall victim to everything this man is saying, dude, in this video. So I have to constantly reassure the small, young, hurt boy that is in me that everything is going to be all right and that it's not so bad, you know? He's right. Gurjeet's right in the video.
Than external rewards. And external recognition and internal stability are two completely different systems. And perhaps the real shift here is much simpler and much harder. It's trying to transition from please see me to this is how I see. It's in trying to accept who you are as you are, rather than seeing yourself as a reflection in the eyes of others.
Yeah, final note, which is why when I create now, it's not from the point of, oh, I'm trying to be somebody. I create now because God put us on this earth to create. And I want to fulfill God's message and God's role that he put me here for. He put me here to create abundance. God is an abundant entity. Why would he want his people, especially if he's living through each and every single last one of us, why would he want us to live in fear and hate and lack, right? So I live now to create for God as opposed to creating for validation. Ladies and gentlemen, xCephasx.
Others. As silly as it sounds, it's in trying to fall in love with the version of you that exists when you want nothing from the outside world. Perhaps at this point of time, your internal nervous system may no longer be dependent on the gaze of the viewer. You're not creating to exist. You create from a place where you already do. So maybe the real question is not whether we want to be famous. The real question might be, what would your work look like if you already felt seen and loved? It's simple, but it may be the only way to fix the hole that exists inside of you and me. If you stayed for so long, thank you so much for watching.
No worries. Footy!